This audio has been taken from the Citizens Archive of Pakistan's Oral History Project.
Zeenat Haroon Rashid.
Date of birth? Date of birth?
21st, 1928.
Place of birth?
Karachi.
Your mother's name, if you
And Lady Nusrat Abdullah Haroon.
Her occupation?
She was a housewife plus a politician.
Your father's name?
Sir Abdullah Haroon.
And his occupation?
He was a businessman and politician.
Would you have any siblings?
Yeah, 5 sisters and 3 brothers.
Okay, and if we could have their names?
Yeah, one is Yusuf Haroon, who was the governor of West Pakistan. Then there was Mahmud Haroon, who was a minister. And Yusuf Haroon was the chief minister of Sindh as well in the early 1950s. And there was a sister who was the president of the APWA after Begum Liaquat Ali Khan died. And there was a sister who was a doctor, Dr. Shaukat Haroon, who worked in the Lady Dufferin Hospital. Then I have a younger sister who is now taken over as the president of the All Pakistan Women's Association.
And any children?
I have 3 and all living abroad.
When and which city did your family migrate from India?
We didn't migrate. We lived in Karachi, born in Karachi, and saw partition in Karachi when it was a small little city.
अगर आप पहले से पाकिस्तान में बस रहे थे तो इस शहर का नाम तब कराची भी था?
कराची था और छोटी सी जगह थी, बड़ी नहीं थी. It was a small city, very clean, very tidy, and very, very busy.
Could you please list the schools you attended for your education, including rough dates if you could?
The education, I studied here and in the convent school. Then I did college for 2 years, but privately. And that was all my academic.
If you could list the main jobs and dates you've had since 47.
What?
The main jobs and dates you've had since 47.
In what I did in 1947.
Since then, like if you've had any kind of occupation, any kind of job.
Well, I was working for the APWA magazine when its partition took place under the tutelage of Begum Liaquat Ali Khan and Miss Billy Miles. And I worked in the magazine for a couple of years while it was still on and before Qaid Millat died. And I was also in the National Guard, and I was a captain of the National Guard, which Begum Saab had made in Pakistan. It was a women's National Guard, and we were attached to the army. So we did all army training, rifle training, and typing, and everything else that would go for a woman to take part if there was a war, because we were very afraid there might be a war with India. And if the men had gone to the frontier, the women would take over.
Could you describe any 3 significant events or issues in your life that you would like to definitely discuss in this interview?
Like to discuss in the interview, I can just say that it was a wonderful time because one came to know Qaid-e-Azam personally, Qaid Millat personally, Begum Liaquat personally. All these were personal friends of the family, and therefore, as they lived in this house before partition, and because before partition there were no hotels in Karachi as such, and so if anybody came for a conference, which they would come in 1946, 1945, and 1940, they would come and live in this house because it was large enough to accommodate all the members of the National Muslim League. And so they all stayed here, and one came to know them all personally, whether it was Raja Sahab of Mahmudabad, or whether it was Sardar Bahadur Yar Jang, whether it was Raja Ganzarfar Ali. I mean, you name them, they were all guests of this house.
Any additional thoughts or comments before we begin?
More comments. Well, the other thing was it was a wonderful era, and it was wonderful that one could watch history unfolding, and to see the election, to see the referendum election was another great sort of a step in one's life to see how the Muslim League was fighting for its survival, but getting there and doing so well that every referendum was going in our favor, especially in Karachi. We had, in those days, the women had 2 votes. One was for the general seat and one was for women's seat in the urban areas. So we had to work very hard to get these women to come and vote for both the seats. And we did it. And we managed to get them all, working for our women candidate and producing her, whoever she was. She was somebody who didn't even know very much Urdu or didn't know what to speak, but because she was Muslim League, everybody was working hard to get her elected. And we did get her elected.
Were you ever involved in any political activity?
Well, in the political activity in this respect, that there was in those days, before the Women's National Guard, which was brought about after partition, this was the Muslim League National Guard. Again, we were girls who were working towards the political life of Pakistan and working in the referendum and garnering votes and gathering women together in rallies and in jalsas. So we did all that.
Did you ever have any affiliations to a refugee camp? Did you ever volunteer in one?
Well, I did work in a refugee camp because, and especially not so much in the refugee camp, but all the refugees who came into the hospital in those days, Jinnah Hospital was a small little hospital, and they was overcrowded with refugees which had things wrong with them. So I used to go there and work with my sister, who was a doctor at the Jinnah Hospital, and help the refugees, which doing their bandaging or helping with the other work, so that the few nurses that we had, were able to look after the more serious cases.
I wanted to ask if you ever witnessed any rioting or violence.
Well, there was very little rioting in Karachi itself. And I think there was only one in which the Muslims decided that they were going to go after the Hindus in the Amil colony. There was a colony called the Amil colony in Bandar Road. Bandar Road is where, Quaid-e-Azam's mausoleum is. And there was only rioting. But then the Muslim leaguers, and including my brothers, went there and stood in front of the crowd and said, we are not going to kill any Hindu and we are not going to do anything to anybody who is a non-Muslim, because that is not the way we want Pakistan. So that was the only bit of rioting that won. But there was no killing and no suffering anyway.
How did you see Karachi change as refugees from across the border started pouring in?
Well, when they first came, they were in a pitiable state, because they all came without belongings. They came when they were, I'm talking about the poorer class, and not even the poorer class, they must be the middle class or the the peasants who were looking after their lands. They came carrying their saman in bundles, and the few bundles that they had, then you had to feed them, you had to clothe them. Everybody was gathering together and getting clothes made, bringing their old clothes to help them because they had nothing. And so that was the main thing that we were doing at that time.
You say that you met and knew Quaid-e-Azam Jinnah. Could you tell us more about your meetings with him? If you could describe
Well, Quaid-e-Azam lived here. So he used to come here and spend summer with us, even before partition. And so we saw a lot of him, but he was a very strict disciplinarian. And he allowed just so much and not more. I mean, we never called him uncle. We never called her auntie. We used to call them Mr. Jinnah before he became Quaid-e-Azam, after which we addressed him as Quaid-e-Azam. And Miss Jinnah was always Miss Jinnah. The two of them, of course, used to call each other by their pet names. She used to call him Jinn, and he used to call her Fatty, and for Fatma. So, but I remember them as going there and having tea with them. That was the time when they allowed the children to come into their rooms. And they had a sitting room in which the children would go and sit at their feet while they talked politics with my father or my mother or the elder sibling. And it was wonderful because we did just hero worship. It was plain hero worship for Quaid-e-Azam.
Ma'am, I would like you to tell us about the flag of Pakistan. Quaid-e-Azam was an extremely noble and an extremely straightforward man. When he got us Pakistan, he got us that we should leave three things behind in India. One was corruption, one was nepotism, and one was bribery. If you leave these three moral sins behind, then Pakistan can become a great nation. And I want you to make it that you should have unity, unity of thinking, unity of being one, which means that from now, after Pakistan, there should be no Baloch, no Punjabis, no Sindhis, no Pathans, nobody. If he told me, he says, if somebody asks you, what are you when you go abroad? You have to say you're a Pakistani. Don't say, I am a Muslim, and don't say I'm from such a province. Those two things don't matter. This is your faith is your own. And as far as you're concerned, your province will all become one. It's all become Pakistan, like India. You know, like in India, if somebody asks, where are you from? They immediately say, India. They don't give you, that province UP or whatever. So he was very, very solid on that part. Then came the flag. Before the partition, the Muslim League flag was just green and the Chandara. In Pakistan came to being. We had the flag made in this very room. And it was made, and they put a small band for the minorities. It was sent to Quaid-e-Azam because he said that, send it to me once you finished it so that I can approve it. When it went to him, he turned around, he says, what is the percentage of the minorities in Pakistan? So the man said, sir, it's 30%. He says, then this flag should have 30% of the white border because we have to include the minorities in our flag. And another thing he was very, very sound about was discipline. He said he had never been to prison, even when there was all this Gandhiji's riots in India. So somebody asked him, he says, why haven't you been to prison with all these great people? He says, because I believe in the law of the land. Nobody must break the law of the land. If you want to make any sort of a opposition, open your voices and talk about it or write about it, but don't have indiscipline. The other thing, he turned around to me once and he said, what do you understand about faith? Because it was unity, faith, and discipline. So I said, faith, meaning, I'm a Muslim? He said, no. Faith in the country to make this nation so great, which I think now Israel has done. Make this country so great that everybody around will say, this is Pakistan. This is what you young people must do. You mustn't let it go. So of course, we were very much impressed and thought that's what we were going to do. That was our Quaid. Noble, simple, and as I've told you, he never spent money of the government on anything because he turned around, he said, the government, we didn't have much money, the India hadn't given us money. So his thing was, I must not spend money, and I told you the incident when he had the meeting of the cabinet. So his ADC said, sir, what shall I serve with the tea? Shall I serve cakes or biscuits or sandwiches? He said, nothing. So the ADC, they say, here's the governor's general's house and I'm going to serve nothing but tea. He said, yes, because this is the government money. These people should have had their tea. They should have had their breakfast and come to the meeting. I'm not giving them anything more than tea, which he didn't ever. If he had a reception, except for orange squash and potato chips, we got nothing. At that time, it was quite surprising. But why? Because he would have had to spend the government money, and he didn't want to do that. So that's what all the qualities that would have made Pakistan great, I think, because all the nobility was there. You know, he bought this, what is called the Qaid-e-Azam Museum, Mohata Palace, but he bought it before partition. He sent his money from Bombay and paid for these two. And he'd written in his will that after his sister dies, it should go to the government. Again, he had a daughter. He could have said, and he had other sister and brothers. No. Where does it go? Back to the government. Now, if you have met that kind of a man, obviously, you would really believe that Pakistan would survive and become the greatest nation. I didn't think so. I thought we wouldn't be less than anything in the West. And he was going to do everything for the poor. He would give them free education. He believed very strongly. He sent his daughter, his sister in those days to school in Bombay. And then he sent her to Calcutta for training for dental. And he believed very strongly in women's education, everybody's education. He believed that there should be free medicine, free, what he was thinking of was what he'd seen in the West. And he hoped we could make Pakistan that. But with that, you had to have a lot of morality. And he did have it. And his people around him also, Nawabzada Liaquat Ali Khan, Sir Zafrullah Khan, and there was a Hindu lawyer, Hindu judge who became his law minister. If you notice, his cabinet also did not stick to the people who had been in his ministry, in his cabinet that he had before partition, are all people of capabilities. So Zafrullah was known for his foreign dealings. And so obviously, he didn't believe, he wanted to make Pakistan great. His whole intention was that the Muslims would one day be really what they were in the days before, you know, after the Prophet, all the scientists, everybody were Muslims. And they had conquered the whole of the Middle East because of their behavior. And he thought we would be back in that degree. He really believed it. He never thought this would, you know, not come to be, because his own purpose was very, very noble.
Did you attend Qaid-e-Azam's funeral? Did you attend Qaid-e-Azam's funeral?
Yes, I was here for his funeral, and I went to the funeral, and it was a very pitiable sight, because to suddenly lose somebody who you wanted to live forever and have him go so fast and so suddenly. According to us, we didn't know he was that ill, because he never really let on that he was that ill. And that was the unfortunate part, that we saw so little of him that within the year he was dead.
How did you find out? How did the city find out?
That he'd gone?
Yeah.
Well, actually, my mother came to know. I think she was the first one, because she was very friendly with Miss Jinnah. So she was the one who found out, and she told us. So we went for the funeral itself. We didn't go early in the morning as she did and be there with Miss Jinnah all through. But we went a little later and was there in time for the funeral. For the first time, I saw his brother. I had never seen him, because Qaid-e-Azam did not allow his family to see him otherwise. I mean, we didn't know that he had a sister and a brother. And the first time I saw him, and he looked so much like the Qaid, because he was that same tall, thin chap. And that's the first time, and I was astonished. That was the first time he came into the house, the Gigi house. He didn't believe in nepotism. He felt he must keep his family, except for Miss Jinnah. He kept all his family away, whether it was Shireen, or whether it was any other sister, or whether it was his brothers. We never saw them.
What was the literary and the social scene like post-47 in Pakistan?
What was he?
The literary and the social scene like post-47?
The social scene like in Karachi?
Yeah, in Pakistan.
In Pakistan. It was a very liberal society. Everybody was doing what they wanted to do. And there was a lot of happiness at the idea that we'd got Pakistan. happiness that we were all Muslims together thinking the same way. There was no division, whether it was the poor, the rich. As far as religion concerned, we were all alike. For the Eid prayers, everybody went. Whether our servant went with my brothers or the Qaid-e-Azam servants went, and they all stood in one line. And so there was a lot of equality, liberalism, and yet a lot of happiness, I think.
What role did women play in Pakistan in the 47 to 57 decade?
Well, 47, we played, as I told you, that we worked in for the referendum. And we then then Begum Liaquat made the Women's National Guard, where we learned to shoot and fire and, be soldiers for the army. Plus, then she insisted that the young girls of that era should work in places so that the other people, the poorer class, would allow their girls to work. Because she said, if you girls from good families work in the offices, then they will allow their girls. So I really think she was the first women feminist of Pakistan, because Miss Jinnah was more Qaid-e-Azam's sister, and she carried on helping him and doing what he needed to do. But Begum Sahib took an active active part in the life of the women of Pakistan. We worked in the intelligence department and worked as clerks and peons. And she didn't care what we were doing, but we had to be seen to be working. And because we were working, that's how Pakistan women came to be telephone operators and went out to become clerks, because if rich people from good families, girls are working, and this is what she wanted us to feel, that and the people should know, then they will also let their girls go. And so I think the liberalism that the women have today started off with Begum Liaquat Ali Khan.
What was the first government of Pakistan like, and did you have any interactions with them?
Well, I had a lot of reaction because I was very friendly with Begum Sahib and with Qaid-e-Millat. So if every time they entertained Nehru or they entertained someone, I was always there as one of the young people, because they loved having a whole group of people who were not just politicians and diplomats, but also young people who could take part. And so I was very lucky, I thought, because I was taking part in the history of Pakistan. Whether Nehru had come to visit Karachi, well, Qaid-e-Millat had a dinner for him, I was there. And to meet Nehru and to meet all these great people on a personal basis was something that I can't forget.
Did you attend Mr. Liaquat Ali Khan's funeral, and do you remember the day he passed away?
Well, I was away in Australia because my brother was the High Commissioner then so unfortunately, I don't remember but of course, one heard the news and one was most disturbed, mostly for Begum Sahib, because she and Qaid-e-Millat were two peas in a pod. And it was very unfortunate what happened there, because we'd suddenly lost two great people in one go, practically.
Have you ever been part of or witnessed any historical events leading up to the 1947 partition?
Been what?
Any events that either led to 1947 or that happened soon after, any historical events, if you were part of it?
Well, I think mostly that I belonged to the National Guard, took part in all whatever was happening, whether it was looking after the artisan colony along with Begum Sahib or working on a newspaper. We did everything. We worked in shops, we went into the intelligence department. Anything that Begum Liaquat would suddenly decide that you're going to do this and you're going to do that because it's going to help the nation and it's going to help the women. Her main quality was, and the main fact that she ever did was, what is the reaction on the women of Pakistan? How will they react, and what are you going to do to help them?
Are there any personal stories that you would like to share about your family's early life during 1940?
Well, I can tell you an incident that happened with me and Qaid-e-Azam, which is very condemning me, but I don't mind telling you about it. Because when I was working for the referendum in the 1947 for the Pakistan, I came home and Qaid-e-Azam was sitting in his room and he called us. He said, come in and talk to me and tell me how did the referendum go. This was about 6 o'clock in the evening. The polls had closed. So I said, oh, Qaid-e-Azam, you don't know what I did. I did so much jali votes. that I can't tell you that I've made about 20 jali weights. He said, what? How dare you do that? Now go back right away. I was about 17 or 18. He said, go back right away and pull your name out from the thing. Pull out all those jali names, because I don't want Pakistan on that condition where you have to take jali votes to get Pakistan. I want it clear cut, and you should be ashamed of yourself. I can tell you, I ran out of the room and didn't go see him for the rest of the day.
What do you remember about the 47 to 57 decade?
Well, the year was, as I said, it was very nice because we had a lot of liberty, happiness. We felt we were better than India. And, we had lots of things which India couldn't have because they were still struggling, while we had found that it was fallen in our lap to have all the luxuries or all the... We were on a high. And we felt nothing could stop us from being what we had become. And we were Pakistanis, and we were waving our Pakistani passports all over the world and being very proud that we have this green passport, unlike today.
What was your life like in Pakistan prior to partition?
Well, prior to partition, it was a very quiet life because, one did a few things like social work or whatever, but it wasn't because there was a mixed community in Karachi. There was Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Parsis. So we used to have a sort of meeting with all of them and moved around more with the sort of cosmopolitan crowd than just with the Muslim crowd. The Muslim was mostly here were illiterate or, sort of backward. And so one didn't see very much of them except the few waderas or the landlords from Sindh, whose wives were deeply in parda and whose were sort of husbands married about 5 or 6 times.
So, what was the setup of the Muslim League or the Indian National Congress like at the time?
What was the setup?
Yes.
Well, the Muslim League, as you know, came in later after the Congress had, after Qaeda-e-Azam left and took over the Muslim League mantle. It suddenly soared high because of his charisma and his personality, and people believed in him and trusted in him. And suddenly it was a different ball game having him as head of the Muslim League. And I think that made all the difference in the Muslim League and National Congress. That people who were in the National Congress turned away and came into the Muslim League only because of Qaeda-e-Azam's personality.
So while you were campaigning in 45 and 46 for the elections, did you witness anything important? Did you campaign yourself in India as well, or just in Karachi?
In Karachi, because that was where we were working for this urban lady who would become the member of the Legislative Assembly.
So now we're going to move on to questions about APWA. Basically, how did APWA begin?
Again, it was Begum Liaquat Ali Khan. Again, it was her love for women. And again, it was how to uplift the women of Pakistan. She started the first NGO in Pakistan was Begum Liaquat's APWA. And all that she wanted to do was uplift, again, the women of Pakistan. She started an artisan colony where the men who had come from India had no work. She started so that they should be doing their zari work and their crafts and handicrafts. And so their wives would be helped. So she started a colony, meaning they had a place to live in, which is still going strong, by the way. And then she had this shop where we would go to sell the products of the handicrafts. And then she had schools. She started schools in garages. She started schools wherever she could help it, so that, again, the children who were in the poorer localities could come. Her whole uplift work was towards the women and children of Pakistan.
Can you describe the kinds of women who took part in APWA?
Who
took part in APWA?
Well, there was people like Begum Anwar Ahmad. All the women whose husbands were in the government took part in it, and they would do all this what Begum Saab wanted them to do. They worked selflessly, without money, giving their time, giving their thing, just to see that whatever was her wish and her desire would come true. Well, the first meeting, again, I was much younger, so the older ladies were going for the first meeting. But what happened was, again, as I said, Begum Sahib had collected all the women who she felt, whether they were businessmen's wives like my mother, and there were what you call otherwise people who were in professions, doctors, anybody that she could handle. She would ask them to join the APWA and help in their own way. Doctors had to help with hospitals, with the poorer refugees, and the teachers had to help with bringing up the children's education. So everybody had a role to play.
Can you describe where these meetings were held, what the initial headquarters were like, maybe how many women it started off?
But I would say that the start was about 12 women. And it was they first moved in Begum Saab's, working from Begum Saab's house. Finally, she had such a lot of personality and a lot of verve that she got the government to give her sort of abandoned buildings which the Hindus had. Most of them, because there were a lot of Hindus and Parsis and Christians, they had all the buildings and they had all the Hindu clubs and the things. Muslims were the poorer class who didn't have all these things. So she got those Hindus sort of buildings allocated to her for the APWA, schools which the Hindus had made allocated to APWA. So she managed, she really got an arsenal full of buildings and land given by the government because she was the Prime Minister's wife, and they knew that she was doing a very good job and honest to the core. As you know, that Begum Sahib had no money when when Qaeda Millat died. They were in hock, but they didn't have money in the bank, so that like the people have today. And then the government gave her a house in lieu of the house that she had in India. And that was the only thing that she ever had. But she lived proudly, she lived well, and she used anything that she had for the people of Pakistan. So she was a great lady.
Could you describe your relationship with Begum?
With Begum Liaquat, I adored her. I thought she was a woman who needed all your admiration, needed all your appreciation, because you suddenly, as I say, that I thought she was the first women feminist of Pakistan. She fought with all the older ladies, but to allow all the girls to come and work. She had to work hard on our mothers to say you can come and work with the military intelligence, all where there were men, and there were no women except for us girls. There were about 4 girls working in the thing. And it was a complete military sort of installation it was called the Military Intelligence Department. And all that we did was we worked like peons and clerks and carried, answered telephones. So we were really not doing great work, but we had to be there. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, till the time it finished, and Begum Saab would make a point of saying, "Are you all there? Because I want you to be seen, rather than, not people know that you're not there."
Would you like to recount any particular incidents about the time when you were just one of only 4 girls working for the intelligence agency?
Well, it was, I think, it took us a lot of time to accommodate ourselves amongst the men, because there were 1 or 2 sort of educated officers, but then most of them were Jawans, And I think they got quite a shock to see women working in the military intelligence and taking over and reading things which were meant for the military, because we did get curious enough to wanted to know what was going on, whether we were having a fight with India or we weren't. So we were curious. But the Jawans looked at us a bit suspiciously and accepted us because we had come down from the top. But I don't think they appreciated the fact that we were there.
Did they ever express this?
No, they never expressed it because they were military and they were army. But I think they accepted us. And because, as I said, we'd come from the top, leadership had sent us, and they thought between Qaeda-e-Azam and Qaeda-e-Millat, we were there where we were. And whatever they did, Qaeda-e-Azam or Qaeda-e-Millat, everybody thought it was God's own word, So we were lucky. We lived in a time where we had these 2 great people and Begum Saab, and sort of we followed their tenets wherever they were.
Any particular incidents you'd like to recount about, like your relationship with Begum Ra'ana?
Well, I think I came to know her very well, and she was a great teacher, but a wonderful human being. I can only just say that I never felt the age difference. I never felt that she was ordering me. Whatever she did, it was done in the gentle manner that she had, and expected. I mean, she never thought that anybody could go against her will, because she knew that she was right, and people should know, like us, that she was always right. Whether she decided that we went into the military intelligence or we took up a rifle and started shooting, and we did all that and did it with pleasure because she was there. She was our commander-in-chief of the All Pakistan Women's National Guard.
Could you please tell us more about your experiences in the National Guard?
In the National Guard, well, to hold a rifle was very, very heavy, but we learned how to shoot with it. We learned how to march, and it took a lot for the women to learn how to march left, right, and, sort of on the right foot. And then we learned, St. John's Ambulance was coming to teach us first aid. So we learned how to do first aid, we learned how to bandage, we learned how to do all that. So that we should be in as I said, the army went in the front, we should be at the back holding up the thing. We did a little bit of nursing, we learned all the things that you would think that would be needful. But the worst thing was trying to fire from a rifle. It would hurt our shoulders because, the recoil would hit our shoulder, and that was really painful and leave bruises. But we did it because we thought it was the right thing to do.
Memorable experience at APWA?
In APWA?
Yes.
I think the shop that we had, in which we were selling the handicrafts, it was a great pleasure because suddenly we would have a lot of foreigners coming to the shop, and to be able to tell them that this is made by a chap who's come from Banaras, and he's made this brass thing, or this sari is from made by so and so, or this embroidery is from this the zariwala who's come all the way from wherever it was UP, and they're living. And then we used to say, now you must come, tell the diplomats' wives and the English people or the Europeans that you must come and see the artisans' colony that we've made, and take them there and show them, so that they should also be impressed with what Begum Sahab had done with these people, how she brought them together and made them work so that they could earn their living.
Can we take a break?
Yes.
Is that over?
He'd like to check the audio, but there are a few more questions.
Achha.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been
Oh yeah, we can. I was just checking the time actually. We've got 40 more minutes. So.
This is our most informative interview.
Hmm?
Wow. This has been our most informative interview.
Achha, I'm glad.
Could you please describe, since you've been in Karachi 47 onwards, could you please describe the way Karachi has changed over time, maybe its layout?
Yeah, I can tell you we had no flies, we had no mosquitoes, there was no air conditioning. We had only one fan in the back rooms of the house because we used to open the windows and the breeze would go through because there was not so many high-rise buildings. Every morning at 4 o'clock, the roads of Karachi would be washed clean. And there was a truck going with the water falling on where they were siphoning water onto the ground, and the sweepers were behind the water truck cleaning up. So it was the cleanest city in Asia. There were no mugging, no robberies. We had a chowkidar who used to leave the gates open, go to sleep, and it didn't matter. And the people were very sane, and the poorer people were as sane as the rich people. And there was no difference between the rich and the poor to this degree, where the poor felt hard done by, because the rich businessmen would help them and there would be a lot of helping. And as I said, there was a lot of social activity. By social activity, I mean social works, because the rich, they were seen to be doing things for the poor. Meaning to say, they were seen to be making schools. They were seen to be taking charge of artisans' colonies. They were seen to we used to have women who were doing embroidery, and we were selling the goods so that they should not, even the women, only not even the men, but the women had sewing centers. And so their things were so everywhere people were seen to be helping. And I think that was the greatest asset we had in Pakistan. Today, the people are not seeing that. They're seeing the rich closeted in their homes, having their parties, having their dinners, and not really out helping the poor, not even the government. I mean, those days, even the government, you felt, was working towards the uplift of the poorer classes. And that's what I think I see the difference in many years ago government and today's government.
Well, thank you so much.
Not at all, been a pleasure. I hope I've helped.
This audio has been taken from the Citizens Archive of Pakistan's Oral History Project.